Guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today this is the second video of my series where I teach you guys how to build a CRUD application using the MERN stack. So in the previous video we set up all of the kind of the backend. We set up our model from our MongoDB database, and you can see we now can insert elements in our database. This series is basically teaching you guys how to make a simple program that allows you to add new foods to a database, and each food contains a food name. For example, in this case, I'm adding an apple, and the property saying how many days has been passed since I ate that food. And this is just for like demonstration purposes. So I know it's not a very useful project, but it's just a way so you guys understand how to incorporate all of these different aspects and functionalities of a CRUD application using MERN. So in this video, the first thing we're going to be doing is implementing a library in our server. So you can see here, we have two terminals. One of them is on the client folder, which has a React application, and the other one is in the server folder, which has a Node and Express backend. So I'm going to install a package called npm install Nodemon, and this package would basically allow us to run our server, but whenever we refresh our server, so whenever we save something and make any changes, it's going to automatically refresh our server and run it again. So we don't need to write node index.js every time we want to run any changes. So in order to do this, we need to install the package. I just install it. And then you can come here to the scripts, and you need to copy and paste the following script tag. So basically you can just erase this and just paste this. So basically just says that whenever we run the command npm run dev start, it will automatically start running our server. And you can see that if I make any changes, for example, I save this, it's going to restart it automatically. So we already have our backend kind of working, and the only thing we need to do now is work in our frontend. So if we go here and close all of our backend files, today we're going to be working on our React application. So if I close this as well, I'll have all of this, which are unnecessary stuff. But if I want to run this this front end, I can just write npm start, and the localhost 3000 will be opened in my browser. So currently we only have like the sample React setup. Like when you create React application, it already comes with this. So we're just going to erase everything. We're going to erase the app.test.js, the index.css, the logo, the service worker, and the setup tests. I always do this because they are kind of unnecessary for now. So we're also going to erase kind of like all of the stuff that we're importing from those files. So you can just erase this and add a comment here and save this. And then we can just come here and erase this right here. And let's just erase everything here. Okay, our program will be very simple. You can see that if I refresh this, why isn't it refreshing? Let me run it again. Npm start. It should appear the changes, right? It should be an empty white. Yeah. Okay, it's working. So the only things we're going to be having is an h1 saying CRUD app with MERN. So you can see now the changes appear, and we also need two inputs. So we're going to have an input of type text, which will basically be the input where we write the name, and then we can have a input of type number, and this will be where we input all of our numbers. So you can see they are kind of different. This one we can write text, this one we can only write numbers, and we can increase them by pressing this button. And this is just a cool thing. I just wanted to implement two different data types so I can use two different inputs. So at the bottom, we also need a button. And this button will be add to list. And let's add some labels. So on the top, the first input is going to have a label saying name of food name. So food name. And the one on the bottom is just days since you ate it. Days since you ate it. Okay, we can save this, and you can see they appear right here. However, we're going to be working with some CSS because it's kind of ugly for now. I'm going to erase everything that came with the CSS file, and I could just come directly here and on the app, because everything is wrapped around this, as you can see, there's a div with a class name called app. I can just come here and give it a display flex. I always do this, display flex, and give it a flex direction of column so that we can basically make stuff stack on top of each other instead of just being like one next to each other. So if I make this column, you'll see that now everything is on top of each other. However, you can see also that since it is on display flex, everything is kind of like spaced out to the edges. So I'm gonna fix that by just coming here and writing input. So I'm grabbing all of the inputs and setting the width equal to like 200 pixels. I'm also gonna set the height to be like 30 pixels, and I want the font size inside of the inputs to be like 20 pixels. So let's see how that looks. You can see this changed and now it looks kind of good. However, it's not in the center, and the way we make this appear in the center is by basically coming here and adding a justify content center and an align items center. So if we save and come here, you can see now everything is on top of each other and it looks fine, right? I'm just gonna give some margin to everything. So I'm even gonna grab the button as well because I wanna make those same changes to the button, and I wanna add a margin. So I can come here and write margin of 5 pixels. So everything will be kind of like spaced away from each other. It looks good in my opinion. This is basically the front end we're going to be having, and here in the bottom we're going to have the list of all the foods that we get from the database. But more importantly for now, we just want to make it so that whenever you write something here, we save the text and the number that are here into a state, and futurely whenever we click on this button, we want to send those state values to the backend so we can store in the database. And we do this very simply by just coming to our program right here and creating those states. So I can just come here and write const, and we need a state called food name, and the variable to set that state is set food name, and we can just call the use state hook. If you don't know what a use state hook is, I would recommend I have a video on this, so I would definitely recommend watching that video because states are definitely one of the most important properties of React. So I'm also gonna have days. I'm just gonna call it days. It basically represents the day since I ate that food, and set days equal to use state. And instead of being a string, it's going to be a number. So the base case is 0. So we just have our two states, and we basically now need to implement the functionality where we grab those information that are being written in our input. So we can just come here to the input and give it an onChange property. And inside of here, we can pass a function, right? So we need to grab the event property. So I'm just gonna write event and pass a lambda function. And inside of this lambda function, let me save this. Inside of this lambda function, I want to grab the set food name function. So set food name, and just set it equal to the event.target.value. And event.target.value is the value of the current input. So for example, if I write a, the event.target.value is a, but if I add an s, it's now as you can see. So this is why it works if we do it like this. So I'm just gonna copy this and I'm gonna paste it on the other input, and instead of set food name, I'm gonna make it set days. So now we're grabbing the two variables from our inputs, and this is very easily, like now we can easily just send it to the backend by adding an onClick event to our button. Basically, if we wanna create a functionality so that whenever we click on this button, we call a function, we need to come here on the top and create this function. So we're going to use the ES6 syntax. So add, it's the name of the function, add to list equals to parentheses and the function. And if we want to call this whenever we click on the button, we can just copy the name of the function and paste it here. So whenever we click on this button, we call the add to list. And for now, I just want to show you guys that it works. So I'm going to console log the food name and the days. So I'm just basically, whenever I write here, I'm going to open the inspect and go to the console. I'm going to be writing here, for example, bananas. And the day since I ate it, it's 1. When I click here, you can see it says bananas 1. If I change this to, I don't know, 9, and I click here, it's bananas 9. So it means it's working. We're grabbing all of the information and we're setting to the states. So instead of directly doing this, we now need to insert and install a package that is very famous. I talk a lot about this package in my channel. It's basically a library called Xuse. So if I am inside of that client folder, I can just come here and write yarn add Axios, or if you're using npm, you can just write npm install Axios. And as I mentioned before, this library will allow you to create HTTP requests, which basically allows us to send information from our front end to our backend and create this communication. So now that I installed Axios, I can just come here in the top and import Axios from Axios. And now I can take use of this library by just writing Axios dot the name of the HTTP request. So basically I could write get, I could write post, I could write put. In our case, for now, we're gonna write post because we want to post information, we want to insert information. And inside of here, we need to pass the route from the backend that we created. However, if you remember in the last video, we didn't have a communication with the front end. So instead of creating a post request, a post route, we created a get route. So if I come here to my index.js, I'm gonna change that. Instead of being app.get, I'm gonna change this to app.post. And this is the route where we insert stuff into our database, as you can see here. And I'm gonna call this /insert. And now if we come to our front end and just write http //localhost 3001, which is the name, the port that I created, and /insert, we're now reaching this route and communicating with this function. However, we need to make sure that we find a way to send this information through this communication. So in order to do this, we can pass an object right here. So let's pass an object which will have two properties: food name, which will be represented by the state food name, and days, which will be represented by days. So we're just sending this object to the backend and sending the values equal to the states that we already have. So if we come to our index.js, and since we already applied the middleware saying we want to use express.json, it's already parsing all of the JSON coming from the front end, meaning that in order to access the value that we got here, we can just come to our index.js, create a variable, for example, called food name, and set it equal to rec, which is require, dot body, which is how we access those objects, and the name of the property, so food name. And we can do the same to const days equal to rec dot body dot days. And now these two variables right here, or these two constants, represent the values that we wrote over here. And this is how we can easily just grab this, and instead of writing apple over here directly, we just change this to food name, because now we have a representation of what we wrote in the front end. And similarly, we can just come here and write days. So now instead of doing this, we can just save this. You can see that since we have Nodemon, it automatically saved. We can come here, you can see there's no, like, the only two elements in our database are the two apples that I inserted in the last video. And if I come here and write, for example, I don't know, potato, and I ate potato 2 days ago, and I click add to list, let's inspect element to see if there was any errors. And there was an error because, and I know exactly what the error is because I always forget to do this when I record these videos. You need to install something in your backend called course. So if we come here to, let me open another terminal and navigate towards our server. So you can see I'm now inside of the server file. I can write npm install course. And course is a package that will allow us to communicate with APIs that we create. So basically, as you can see here, this is the error appearing, saying that we need to apply this so that we can make a connection to our front end. So now that I installed course, I can just come here in the top and write const course equals to require course, course, and I can just simply come here and write app.use course. So now that that is working, I can try this again, and I just click add to list, and now the error doesn't appear anymore. And more importantly, if we refresh our database, you can see that now the potato appears in our database. So we just made a clear connection between our front end and our back end, meaning that everything is perfectly working. And honestly, this is already a basic aspect of a CRUD application. You're already making a very important move over here. So the only things we need to add now is basically the functionality to read everything. So for example, we just want to display everything from our database over here. And maybe just, I don't know if in this video or in the next video, I want to be able to update and delete those information in order to finalize the CRUD aspect of our application. So in order to read this, we need to come here and we're gonna make another XUse request. However, in order to make that XUse request, we need to create a route that will display all of that information. So if we go to app.get instead of post, and let's create a route called read. So this is where we're going to display all of our information. We're going to delete all of this because honestly, this isn't necessary. It's all different. So instead of here, the only thing we're going to be doing is calling all of the Mongoose syntax to read data from our database. So in order to read data from our database, we need to grab our food model object that we created in the last video. Just like we used the food model over here, we can come here and write food model. Damn, I just realized I wrote food wrong. I'm gonna change this. Sorry if I if you guys realized that in the last video, but I just changed everything. So food model dot find, and inside of here we can pass two things. First of all is what we want to pass. For example, if I want to grab all of the data in the database, I can just pass an empty object. However, if I wanted, for example, to only find the data in the database which were called bananas, or no, actual apples, I could just write where and pass, for example, food name is equal to apple. And this would return all of the data in the database where the food name was called apple. However, we don't want to do this. We just want to read everything in our database. So I'm going to erase this and just leave it as an empty object. And over here, we can pass two things. One of them is error and the other is result. And error represents any error that appears when we're trying to make this query. And result basically represents the information that we're getting. So let's first check to see if there was any error, because if there is, we want to res.send. So we want to send that error. And if there isn't, because res.send basically closes everything, so we don't even need to write an else statement. We can just come here, and if there isn't any error, we just run to res.send the result. So if we save here, and we basically come here to our backend, so localhost 3001, you can see that if I try to reach the /read, it should display all of our data. You can see, yeah, it displayed all of our data over here. So an array with objects, and each object represents the ID, the food name, the day since I ate, and I guess this is the version. So we have all of our information currently being sent to this route. However, in order to read this information in the front end, we can come to our React application here in the app.js, and I'm going to be using the useEffect hook. So if you don't know what the useEffect hook, again, I have a video on that, so I would recommend checking it out because it is extremely important in React. So we can come here to the top and call the useEffect hook. So basically it's just a way so that we can call this whenever we render our page. So this will be called whenever we refresh our page. And inside of here, we also need to put a comma and an empty array, meaning that we're only going to be calling this if we're only going to be calling this once, sorry. So inside of here, we can make another XUse request. So XUse.get instead of post. And we're going to be passing the same thing as we passed here. However, we're going to be passing, instead of insert, we're going to be passing read. So this is important because now we're just reading the information. However, differently from this we're just sending the information. So we're not expecting to get anything back. However, if we need to get something back, we need to recognize that this is a promise. So we can write a .then, and the values sent from the backend, so the values from the response are sent as arguments to the .then. So we can just write response and pass it as a function. And inside of here, for now, we just want to console.log the response. So you guys can see that we are actually getting that information. So if we save this and we refresh our page and go to our console log, you'll see that now we have an object console logged, which is basically an object full of information, but most importantly, there's a property called data, which inside of here has an array of 3 elements, which are exactly the data that we have in our MongoDB database. So this is how we're getting the information from our backend, and currently we just want to display it on the front end. So in order to do that, I want to come here and create a state called food list, and we're gonna create a function called set food list, and this is going to be an array. So let's just pass an empty array. And instead of console logging the response, and you remember that the response from the data from the backend is basically represented as an object with the data, and inside of the data there's an array. So instead of doing of simply console logging the response, we can just come here and call this set food list and set it equal to the array that is returned from the backend. So the array is in the response.data. And if we save here, and we're not currently going to be able to see that. However, if we come here to the bottom, and I'm gonna add an HR so you guys can clearly see like the break. So an HR will create a weird, I'm not seeing the HR. Okay, I'm just gonna say like data h1 data, no, food list. Yeah, food list, and below here I want to grab the list, so food list, and I want to map through it. The map function basically allows us to grab a value and a key, which is the value of the array and the index that it exists in. And inside of here, I can just return a div, and that div will contain two things. It's going to contain an h1 saying the food name. So inside of here, I can just grab value.foodName because that's exactly what is written here. And I don't think, yeah, there's no, it's not console logging anymore. So that's exactly the name how we wrote here. So we can just write food name. And I also want a h1 as representing the value dot days since I ate. So I'm just gonna copy exactly how I wrote here. So days since I ate, and I'm gonna paste it over here. So if we save this, you can see that now all of our data are being displayed in the screen. So the food list has an apple, and there's 3 days since I ate it. There's another apple with 3 days since I ate it, and there's a potato which I ate 2 days ago. And the important thing for you to recognize here is the basic idea of a map function. So we have a list that we just set the response.data, so the data we got from the backend, equal to the list that we have over here. So now we have a list of all our data. However, if we want to display that data in our screen as, for example, a list, we can just call the food list.map and grab these two arguments that already exist from the map function. The first one is value and the other one is key. And I also want to tell you guys that if you're doing this, you need to have key, because if you come here to the console log, it's gonna appear an error. You shouldn't, like, this doesn't affect anything. It's just a warning. It doesn't really matter, but in order to remove that warning, you can just come here to the div and write key equal to key. And that should remove the error, right? So inspect element, console log, yeah, it should work. But more importantly, you can see that the map function will basically say that for every element in this list, I want to render in the screen a div that contains an h1 representing the value.foodName, so the value of that element in the list and the property is food name, and also the value for the element in the list with a property called days since I ate. And that's how we're basically accessing everything. So I guess this is it for this video. I don't want to make this very long. I have no idea how long this video has been. However, we made a lot of progress since the start of this video. We created our front end. We are now able to insert and read data from our backend, which is really cool. And you can see that everything is working. So in the next video, we're definitely going to be working on updating stuff. So if I want to change this to bananas instead of apple, or I want to change it so that I have 8 apples 1 day ago instead of 3, we're going to be able to do that, and also delete elements. So if I want to delete potatoes, for example, I can do that, and it's all going to be fine. So I hope you guys enjoyed this series. I am really excited to continue posting more MERN videos or more videos using MySQL as well, because those are more of the videos I've posted before. If you enjoyed this video, please you can leave it a like and comment down below. Subscribe if you enjoyed the channel. I have a Discord group where I help people, so if you want to enter in the group, please check the link down below. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.